This is Reconstruction. Reconstruction took place from 1865 until 1877 with the Compromise of 1877. So it's 1865, the Civil War has ended. Now the American government, the American people, have to figure out what they're going to do because there are some big changes that have happened. So with the 13th Amendment, slavery is over. They have to change everything about their economy and come up with some new plans in order to protect freed. Some of the questions that the U.S. government has to answer. Number one, how do states re-enter the Union? And was their secession even constitutional? Who's responsible for financially reconstructing the South? How do we treat ex-Confederates? Do we welcome them back? How do we protect the rights of newly freed men? And then how do we organize Southern states and their new governments to include these newly freed? Politicians wanted to reconstruct Southern society so the rights of former slaves were ensured and the political base of the Republican Party could be formed. But there's some questions. How do we reunify the country that has been divided now for 4 years and then before that even more divided? Can we do this quickly? Should we just forgive all the things that have happened? So there's a lot of issues at hand. There are a few different plans for Reconstruction. First is presidential Reconstruction. And that was when Lincoln wanted to use the 10% plan, where only 10% of the state's population had to take an oath of loyalty in order to be readmitted into the Union. This is really different from Congressional Reconstruction, which was much more harsh. Radical Reconstructionists in Congress wanted to be much more harsh, so they wanted to severely punish the South. But something complicated that. It was the assassination of Abraham Lincoln in 1865. After Lincoln was assassinated, his vice president, Andrew Johnson, became the 17th president of the United States. Because Congress was adjourned when Lincoln was killed, Johnson offered a Reconstruction plan to Southern states that revealed that he favored a plan kind of like Lincoln, so he wanted to be very forgiving of the Southern states, although Congress disagreed with his ideas. The new President Andrew Johnson's ideas were very different from the radical Republicans. He granted amnesty to thousands of ex-rebels, including Alexander Stephens, the former Confederate vice president, and the governments he supported in the South were extremely racist and enacted black codes and denied African Americans the right to vote, the right to marry, etc. Reconstruction was heavily debated in Congress as well, and the radical Reconstructionists, led by Sumner and Stephens, had different ideas on how they should deal with the South. They wanted to severely punish them, establish a Freedmen's Bureau, push further civil rights acts, and more amendments to protect the rights of newly freed. To complicate things even more, President Johnson did something that was considered to be illegal and was on trial for impeachment because he violated the Tenure of Office Act in 1867. Although Johnson was put on impeachment trial, he was never removed from office because he just was one vote shy of removal from office. In 1868, Ulysses S. Grant, who was a former general during the Civil War, became the President of the United States. He's most closely associated with excessive drinking and a lot of scandal, and we'll talk more about that in the next unit. But to fast forward a little bit, the next President of the United States after Ulysses S. Grant is Rutherford B. Hayes, and the reason that he won this election was because of the Compromise of 1877. To add to more controversy during this time, in the election of 1876, Samuel Tilden actually got more votes than Rutherford B. Hayes, but Hayes won because of the Compromise of 1877, which essentially ended the military occupation of the South and ended Reconstruction. But probably the most interesting part of this is what happened socially in the South. We had some individuals who came from the North to capitalize on what had happened. Those are carpetbaggers. We had scalawags who were Southerners who were thought to be in cahoots with the carpetbaggers. And then we had redeemers, people who wanted to keep the South just as it was before the Civil War. But even though they were free, the newly freed men didn't really experience the freedom that whites did. So for the newly freed men and women of the South, we had conservative Southerners who resisted Reconstruction and wanted to keep it as it was. They enacted sharecropping. They drew color lines in every way possible, so politically, socially, in every way. Some people took a very extreme view, and that was people like Nathaniel Bedford Forrest, who helped to create the Ku Klux Klan, also called the Invisible Empire, that controlled a lot of the South.
Free created using Powtoon.